Today I'm reviewing After the Funeral by Agatha Christie. This is a 1953 novel featuring Hercule Poirot. And this is just one of those great novels where all of the magic comes together for Christie. Plot, characters, just interesting occurrences, and she's dealing with all of these themes and motifs that have been running through a lot of her stories before this. This one, as the title suggests, takes place immediately after a funeral. It's the funeral of Richard Abernathy, who's kind of, he's kind of the patriarch, but he's certainly the richest of this Abernathy family, and he's just died and left this enormous fortune, and he's got nieces and nephews. He's got one sister and a brother. His brother Timothy, his sister Cora. Everyone's gathered for his funeral, and his in-laws. It's again another disjointed family sort of story. They're all going to the house after the funeral, and they're talking about what's happening, and Mr. Entwistle, who is the family solicitor or lawyer, is talking to them about kind of the basics of the will, and Cora, who no one has seen for years and years because she went off and married a painter and was kind of the black sheep of the family. She's quite a bit older. It's been 20 years since anyone's seen her, and she starts blabbing, as she usually does. This is a woman who always says uncomfortable things at the wrong moment, and the thing that everyone hates is that she's usually saying something that's dead on or right. And in this case, she says, well, it's all been hushed up rather nicely. And they're all saying, well, what are you talking about? And she says, well, he was murdered, wasn't he? So that's kind of this bombshell. Some people laugh, some people just stare at her. Everyone leaves with a super creepy feeling. But in the end, they're just like, well, that's Cora. She just says these things. She believes that Richard Abernathy was murdered. Well, this is just sensational. So everyone goes off and doesn't think any more of it until the next day when Cora's companion, Miss Gilchrist, finds Cora dead, and she's been struck down with a hatchet. So she's dead one day after suggesting that her older brother, Richard Abernathy, was murdered. Now her accusation seems a lot more serious to Mr. Entwistle, who is the solicitor, you'll remember. He doesn't feel good about it, so he starts kind of asking questions about Cora, to the different family members, trying to get their feel for things. Asking questions about Richard, wondering if he was unwell, if he was given any medicines that were unusual, whether he said anything to anyone that suggested that he was being poisoned. We have this, and finally, Entwistle's still unhappy, still dissatisfied, so he goes to see his old friend Hercule Poirot, and Poirot undertakes the investigation. The only thing that he gets, that Entwistle gets from his family when talking to them, is the fact that Helen Abernathy, who was married to one of Richard's brothers, just had this uneasy feeling about something was wrong at the funeral, and she doesn't know what it was. She doesn't think it's probably very important, but both Poirot and Entwistle tell her, you're a smart woman. If you saw something and it was wrong, it was probably important, and it will sometime come to you when you're not even thinking of it, and when it does, call us. Okay, so we have a whole colorful cast of characters. We have we've got Timothy, who's the invalid brother of Richard Abernathy, and his wife Maud. We have Helen Abernathy. We have George, who is Richard's nephew, and Susan, who is his niece, and her husband Gregory Banks. He was kind of he works in a chemist shop and is sort of an introvert, kind of a strange character. We have Rosamond, this beautiful young woman, and her husband Michael Shane, another niece and nephew-in-law of Richard Abernathy. They're all wanting the money. Money seems to be the motive in this. Then, of course, we have Miss Gilchrist, who is the paid companion to Cora Lansquenet, and she's kind of frightened, and Poirot and Entwistle are kind of frightened for her too, because they figure, well, if Cora was struck down, Miss Gilchrist might have noticed something, might have seen something, might have overheard something, and her life may be in danger. And in fact, when Susan goes down to clear out Cora's things from her cottage and spend the night Miss Gilchrist receives a package with a piece of wedding cake in it, kind of an older tradition. People would send a relative a piece of wedding cake, and that night Miss Gilchrist becomes violently ill and almost dies, and they find that there was poison in the cake. The reason she didn't die was because she didn't eat the whole cake, because she's a spinster, and women of this age knew of an old sort of superstition that if you put part of the wedding cake under your pillow at night, you'll dream of your future husband. So this one thing saves her from being killed. Again, the whole family kind of come together, and Poirot comes down there to the old Richard Abernathy house, pretending to be someone who wants to buy the house to open it up to refugees after the war. And but really, he's investigating, talking to people, and the story becomes very, very interesting. Because there are quite a few layers going on in it, and we have a lot of nice imagery. First of all, we've got a motif of painting. Cora is a painter. Her husband was a painter. Neither of them were very good. And Cora always collected paintings and would buy paintings at sales and didn't really know a good painting from a bad painting. There's a suggestion that she doesn't even do her own paintings, that she paints from picture postcards. There's sort of this naive approach to art. She's not very cultured. She's just more of an artsy sort of person. And then we have a motif of nuns. For some reason, nuns keep popping up in this story all over the place, and they're always collecting for something. And then there's a question about, well, you know, are all these nuns who they say they are? Maybe one nun is a man dressed up as a woman, and maybe that's how the murderer gained entrance into Cora's house to strike her down and kill her. Of course, we have a very brutal murder, the murder of Cora, and I think this novel is successful because, again, we have strong characterizations. You really, even though there are a lot of characters, you really understand who they are. Unlike Mrs. McGinty's Dead, where it's hard to kind of follow the four threads of the kind of murders in retrospect. This one, the characters are very strong. You understand who they are, and the plot is so ingenious, and it's such a wonderful surprise at the end. It just makes the whole thing very satisfying to read. I highly recommend it. Of course, I give it a 5 out of 5. The next novel I'll be reviewing is a Miss Marple novel called Pocketful of Rides, another nursery rhyme based novel, also quite enjoyable.